Would you trust your soul to someone who doesn't believe that your soul exists? More than that, I heard many people telling you to do counseling, to find a health professional, to find a psychologist, but what they don't tell you is that if you don't find the right psychologist, the counseling process might even take you away from faith, pull you away from God. Many people try to seek healing in the sessions, but after finishing it, I saw it with my own eyes. They find hard to conciliate what they learn with their faith. So in today's video, I'm here to tell you why is it important to have a Catholic counselor. So let's get started, okay? So why your counselor needs to be Catholic. In order for us to understand the impact that a counselor has into us, we need to understand what is psychology. And this is a really heated debate because it's really hard to define what is psyche. So psychology will be the study about the psyche. But how would you define psyche? You know, this is a huge debate. And if you go to different authors, like if you go to Carl Jung, he will say that everything is psychological. But if you go to B.F. Skinner, he will say that psyche doesn't exist. Psychology, many people don't consider it as science because of that. Because psychology, we don't have a defined object. We don't have a defined object. And this creates a huge problem. What I mean by that, if you are studying history, you might disagree with different historians, right? But the problem is that you know what you're studying about. You know that you're studying about the past. The same thing about a doctor. He knows that he's studying human health, biological health. So that creates a huge problem. And if you read any psychological book, you will notice this. What Freud says that is psyche is different from Jung and is different from B.F. Skinner. And therefore, all the concepts, they might be talking about the same things, but they will use different names. Like names such as ego, unconscious, subconscious will be different from author to author. So you don't have a defined terminology sometimes. And this creates a mess. But in order for me to show you, I will need to tell you what psychology is not. So what psychology is not. And in order for us to talk about this, I would like you to imagine, right? The first impression that we have about going to a therapy or going to a counseling process is that psychology is just a bunch of techniques, okay? It's just a bunch of techniques. So you will go there, tell your problems, and then the psychologist, counselor, therapist will just tell you do A, B, C, D, and E, and you will be cured, This is the first impression that we have in this massive field. But if you ask any counselor if it's just techniques, he will tell you that it's not. It's not just techniques. Why does that happen though? Why does that happen? It is because it's really not just techniques. Because if it was techniques, we will left to the other point. You would just press a magic button and we wouldn't be human beings. There is no A plus B plus C plus F, to cure a human being. It's not just telling someone about your depression. It's not just opening up your heart. It's way more than that. And even the techniques, the so-called techniques that we think that they are isolated sometimes, they are deep-rooted in theory and philosophy. So these techniques are deep-rooted in theory. So imagine like cognitive behavioral therapy. I know that the name might sound complicated, but it's basically a therapy all based that our emotions has to do on the way that we interpret reality. Speaking it in a really simple way. And this is a theory already, and all the techniques come from this principle, assuming that every single emotion comes from there. So it's deep-rooted in a theory. Not just that, sometimes this theory in itself is already a philosophy, okay? It's already a way of thinking. It's already kind of like the way that the counselor operates. So you need to imagine that these techniques is integrated on what? Inside of a theory. And this theory is integrated, sometimes is philosophy. I will give you an example. Psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is deep rooted in philosophy and other thinkers. Like we know that Freud had a huge influence from Nietzsche, and not just that, from other materialist philosophers. So Freud, to some extent, he was kind of also a philosopher. And this is when the problems come, because every time that we talk about philosophy, and especially when we are dealing with human beings and healing, we are talking about values. And philosophy, by definition, has implicit values behind the theory. So like the cognitive behavior therapy, if I tell you do this, it is integrated, the technique is integrated in a theory. And this theory sometimes is integrated in a philosophy. And oh no, Daniel, but it's all scientifical, it's all this and that. Okay, great. If it's all scientifical, it might be inside of what we call scientism. I don't know how to write it, okay? I might write it wrong. Write in the comments how it is. English is not my mother tongue. And it doesn't believe in the existence of soul and see us just as biological beings. And this creates a huge problem because many times the counselor that is helping you out, he's not conscious of these implied philosophies inside of the theory. Someone that believes in psychoanalysis might be a total nihilist and doesn't even know. And nihilist means that he doesn't believe that life has meaning. So how you will ask this person, what is your vocation, for example, if he believes that everything is relative, without even noticing it. Just because, like I said, I would even change the color. He bought a theory that is integrated in a philosophy. And this has impacts inside of his being and implies implicit values on his advice. Not just on his advice, even in the way that he structures the relationship. And this is problematic because many clients never had good relationship around them. Some people come with a really complicated background, okay? And sometimes they never had someone that is psychologically healthy. And imagine if the first person that you get is a nihilist and you're inside church and you get a nihilist. So all these implicit values will get into you, because they are somehow better than the lifestyle, the maladaptive lifestyle that you're having now. And this is why psychology is not just a set of techniques. The second point that I want to make here is that psychology is also not the study of human beings. And then you're like, what? I thought that psychology is just studying how your thought is structured, how your mind works, and so on. But we do forget that thoughts are a representation of reality. So therefore, if you're dealing with thoughts, you're dealing to the way that people perceive reality. And ideally, if you're a Catholic psychologist, you need to be adequate. You need to help the person to be adequate to their reality, right? And depending again on which life philosophy that you're following, like some lines of philosophy will be against thinking that there is an objective reality. So therefore, morals are relative again. And this might be implicit. You think whatever you want, and that's fine. I'm not saying that the counselor needs to impose anything on the patient. I'm making you conscious of the impact that a counselor can have on you without you even noticing it. So thoughts are a representation of reality. And for us that we are Catholics, we believe that there is an objective truth. So the more our thoughts are truthful, the best. Because they are better representation of reality. And we, as a consequence, we become happier. Because going against reality is going against your own self. It's like punching yourself and saying that is healthy. Calling a cup of poison juice will not make the cup of poison become juice. And so you see this deep relationship from between thoughts and reality. Right? The thoughts has a great impact on how we live. Not just that, we have also emotions. Our emotions that sometimes looks like that they are irrational, that they look like that we don't understand them, but they are reactions to the world. This is a really important part because we are coming to a point that we cannot isolate a human being from his life. There's no human being isolated from his environment because we are relational beings, like Aristotle will say. We are relational beings. So in order to understand how a human being functions, we need to know how is his life and what is his lifestyle. By knowing that, we can try to reckon the problem in some sense, because we can see the maladaptive behaviors and so on. Even our emotions that sometimes don't pass through our thought process, they are definitely reactions to the world. You need to have that in mind. So there cannot have isolating study of human beings. What we study is human life. I wrote it here wrong. Of humans, of humans. What we study is human life. So psychology is the study of human life. Okay? It's the study of human life. And because it's the study of a human life, this will imply a bunch of stuff. Okay? It will look like a life philosophy. Because the same way that we study the coping mechanisms that the client has, the same way that we study how he's reacting to certain environments and so on, how he structures, how he represents reality in his head, the counselor also has a representation of reality in his head. And again, this implies what? Implicit values. Because representations of reality implies a hierarchy. What is more important? What are the values that are more important? Is justice more important than temperance? Is truth exist or not? Is it relative or not? And so on. So it will have the representation of the counselor, what we call a lifestyle. And then we come to the third point. Psychology, for me, Daniel dos Santos, it is an applied philosophy. Psychology is an applied philosophy. Why? First, because it's not an isolated study of techniques, because techniques require being inside of a theory, and a theory sometimes require to be integrated inside of a philosophy, and even if it's not integrated inside of a philosophy, it's integrated inside of a person that has a personal representation of reality in his head. Has a personal representation. Second of all, psychology cannot be the study of human beings isolated, just how we think and so on, because thought itself is a representation of the world. So thought is relational. Our emotions are a reaction to the world. So therefore, you cannot study a human being outside of his life. And therefore there are better lifestyles, there are better life philosophies than others. We have better life philosophers than others. Because life is objectively, and our happiness deeply depends on that. If you don't believe in that, you wouldn't be watching this video right now. Okay, so psychology is an applied philosophy. And then is when you start to realize that it is a lifestyle in our modern terms, and how people like to call, this is my lifestyle, And there are better lifestyles than others. So the problem with non-Catholic professionals is that they have a different lifestyle than you. They might help you with punctual problems like depression, anxiety. I'm not saying that they cannot solve the problem because they are good professionals. But there is a but. After you heal that, you will struggle to combine what you learn with Catholicism, learn with the church, You will struggle. And that's why many people that sometimes do therapy, they come to the conclusion that they need to leave because sometimes they have religious trauma or they are not in a really nice community. We do have people in the church that are bad too, Catholic means universal. In the church, One of the first bishops were Judas. He was one of the 12. They were bishops too. Judas was bad. He crucified Jesus. So we do have bad communities in the church too. We do have bad people in the church too. And sometimes this person is just in a bad community, but doesn't mean that the church is not true. And then they leave the church. They end up leaving it just because they had a bad community. And this comes with the problem of professionals, right? And if you think, well, would you trust someone, how you want someone to help you with your holiness if he doesn't even believe on it? How you want him to help you out? How you want him to help you to have virtue if he doesn't believe on it? Some counselors doesn't even believe that you can live in chastity. So lust problem, a porn addiction problem, will be something that sometimes they will treat it until a certain point, but sometimes they will not heal it completely until you reach chastity because they think that is normal. It's normal, And not just that, their counseling, like I said, has implicit values because it's highly influenced by their lifestyle. And like I said, even the treatment of depression will have some faith conflict even if he solves the problem. And even if you stay in the church, it will be hard to conciliate. It will be hard to conciliate with faith. Make your life in church harder. Hard to live the lifestyle, hard to be holy. Okay? So we need a Catholic vision. We need a Catholic vision. Because without you realizing, like I said, your counselor is having impact on you. Unconscious impact. The way that is not about the technique itself, but is more about the way that he tells you to apply the technique. The way that he tells you might have implied values. Okay? And even if he say, no, I'm neutral. So he's relativist already because truth is not objective. So therefore, we have a need for a Catholic vision. We have a need. And we have a bunch of advantages. And it's urgent for us to find a Catholic counselor. And it's not because I'm Catholic I'm saying that. I'm saying with real risk. I saw people struggling with that though. I saw moms that bring their kids to counseling and they apply the same module of therapy. They apply inner healing. They apply cognitive behavior for therapy or any other technique or approach. Then the kid leaves the church. Why? Why would I just think? Put yourself on the shoes of your son, on your own shoes, if that's the call, if that's your case. Why your son will listen to you if he can get results from the counselor? Is way stronger. He will tell you, you say all these theories, but what I know is that I had depression and this guy helped me out. So the Catholic counselor will have not just the tools that any other counselor has, but he understands your unique religion. He understands what is Catholicism. He understands the religious struggle. He understands what's your fight. I can name you what it means to have a vocation, what it means to doing the will of God, doctrinal misunderstandings, virtues, vices. These are all aspects that a lay counselor will not be able to do. Why? Imagine you telling a counselor that is atheist and you tell, I'm struggling. I don't know whether this work is from the will of God or not. I don't know whether this person should be my wife or not because I don't know if it's God's will. Should I be a priest or not? And all this stuff. How he will help you. How he will help you with that. And not just that. He can address the common wounds that you have. But more than that, he can guide you to what is a good life according to the Catholic Church. And I know that after this video, many people will have some objections, Many people will say, no. He tells me he's different though. He will not influence my values. He will not touch what I believe and so on. And He would respect me. But tell me, how he will help you out with your holiness if he doesn't believe in holiness? Oh, another objection. Oh, he will help me with my depression, just with my depression. Look, depression is not an isolated problem. Anxiety is not an isolated problem. All these things are a constellation of stuff. They come with irrational thoughts, your vision about future, your vision about past, how you see the present, how you represent yourself to yourself, how you deal with the others, whether the cause of the problem is the others too. These are all aspects. And tell me that he will not have any influence on that? It is a huge problem though. It is a huge problem. And what if, and this is the one that once I really heard someone, saying, because the girl was struggling with, it was a mom telling me, really sad story, but the mom telling me about the story of her daughter. And what if the counselor tells you that the cause of your depression, anxiety, whatever, is the church? What if he says that, no, it looks like that you having a lot of struggle there, maybe stop going. It will be good for you. What if he convinces you? So, to summarize the video, guys, we saw today what psychology is not. It's not just a bunch of techniques. It's not the isolated study of human beings too. It's not a bunch of techniques, because techniques are integrated in a theory, and theories are integrated in a human being that has a lifestyle. It's not the study of isolated humans, because thoughts are a representation of reality, and therefore you cannot separate thoughts from reality. And emotions also are a reaction towards our environment, so you cannot separate emotions from the environment too, in order to study them. Therefore, psychology needs to be a lifestyle, a personal philosophy, okay, a life philosophy. And when you're going to the counseling session, when you're going to see any health professional, he can try to be really, really neutral, but he always will touch how you perceive reality. And I'm not saying, like I said in the middle of the video, I'm not saying that he cannot help you out with your depression, with your anxiety, with your borderline disorder. But maybe after he helping you out, it will be hard to conciliate both. It will be hard to conciliate what he's teaching you with the teachings of the Catholic Church. Okay? Why? Because he doesn't have the same word vision. Not just that, he will not be able to help you out with faith crisis, with trying to figure out your vocation, at least having the basics of it, because, I'm not a spiritual director too. But the thing is, like, having the basics of it, he will not know the pain of fighting against vices and so on. He might not even believe that some virtues exist, like such as chastity. The most important of all, he doesn't believe that holiness exists, and this is a huge problem. Okay, we do have really competent lay professionals, but when it comes to faith and so on, it's way better. Is a need for Catholics to have a Catholic counselor. Okay, so if you like the video, please smash the like button and subscribe in the channel, because we will talk about these truths that I don't see many people talking online. And to help you out with always this kind of deepness, to help you out to understand what is psychology and how to find help, and not just that, to understand also your problems. Okay? See you guys in the next video.